I'm currently working on a fantasy comic called Fountain Regret. I've been posting the last few months on Webtoons, Tapas, and Comic Fury, and it's had a couple of years of preparation. One thing I'm really happy with so far is the setting. As it's fantasy, that comes with a world. So you have nations, conflicts, magic, creatures, the whole nine yards. And going into this project well before I put a first letter on a Word doc to write the comic, I knew that I wanted my setting to be unique and feel alive. And this video is about one activity that's really helped me out with this task, and that is D&D. So D&D, if you don't know what it is, you should play it. It's very cool. It's called Dungeons & Dragons, and you're role-playing with a group of people where you make characters that go on epic quests. A lot of D20s are rolled. A Dungeons & Dragons game is run by a DM, which is a dungeon master, and they are the person who balances the combat encounters, they write the lore, they help guide the adventure, while the players, their job is more to engage the adventure setup and make important decisions that change the outcome. And it's in a lot of popular media, so like podcasts, Vox Machina, Critical Role, etc., D&D movie. And the thing I'm drawing currently on here, which is relevant to the video, it is a comic page that takes place in Trench, and that is the city where my comic starts out in, and is a place that D&D has really helped me flesh out. This picture here is a depiction of the Riverside Park, which is an area near the center, to the point of how D&D connects to my comic. As I mentioned this year, I started posting my comic, but well before that, I was doing hundreds of pages on a OneNote document with cities, places, creatures, all those things. And around the end of 2022, I was like, oh, wow, I have a very big setting with a lot of things on it. I have friends who like D&D. I like D&D. I am a bit of a forever DM myself. Not to say I won't play, but I'm a lot more pulled into the setting up the story, combat encounters. So I got a group of friends together to do a D&D campaign for the setting I'd been working on for a while. And this was still well before I had started writing the plot of the comic. I had like the high concept, but not more than that. In hindsight, I'm really glad that I took a stab at running a D&D campaign. Now, the campaign isn't done yet, but it's pretty far along, and we've gotten through a couple of important arcs. One way that D&D has helped me make my comic is creating a platform for the 44 party members to goof around and find things of interest in my setting, points of interest in the city, lore plot holes, things they question and test. For a while, an example is for a while we did a question of the session where player characters would go into an extraneous lore detail, and it pushed everyone to get creative with the setting and how their character interacts with it. So an example would be a holiday their character separates. You know, having this stuff can just be like trivia, but it's fun to keep for having the setting be more alive, and gives me more to pull from. And also tells me like what parts of my setting are drawing interest and getting the most engagement. My players also help me test the setting by giving me their reactions when I throw horrible monsters at them. There's a monster that's currently in the webtoon that did show up in the comic. If you go on there and read it, you'll encounter it. It'll be the first one you see. That was from the D&D campaign that made an appearance. There's actually one in the relatively near future that I'm not going to spoil, but did come from my D&D campaign, and it's a monster I am very excited for it to appear in the comic, as it's definitely one of my favorites that I've designed. Another way that doing D&D has helped me with my comic is characters. So there's obviously the player characters, but there's also the NPCs, which are characters that have connections and relationships to the player characters and might have importance to the setting beyond the players. And there's actually a minor character who appears in the near future, who's from the campaign. He is a retired treasure hunter who's named Gus, and he has history from the campaign. And even though he is only going to very briefly appear in the comic, there's a lot of lore for him. And by having him in the campaign and including him, it's helped me write his, albeit brief, dialogue with, I think, a little more texture. Doing D&D gives me... That's just an example, but there's other characters, too, where they appeared in the campaign and are in the comic and vice versa. And the comic actually adapts a possible ending for the D&D campaign. It's not over yet, but I did go ahead and pick a course. A really big way that D&D has also helped me with my comic is in the developing the locales. So Drench, the city in which this drawing is showing a snapshot of, it's where my comic is starting. For some context on Drench, so my setting is a continent with a giant hole in the middle, and inside that giant hole is an ancient megastructure called the Fountain. And Drench is a mining city located right next to the fountain, which serves as a hub for treasure hunters. It's underground, dreary, gritty. There's a lot of crime, though there's also a lot of spirit and fun to be had there. And one of my friends who's in my campaign wrote a character who grew up in the starting city, Drench. And they have really helped me think of a lot of details for the setting through engaging with it and writing about it. And doing so really helps the players because, you know, if you're playing in a campaign, you want to be invested in your character. So having some agency and influence over where your character is from is a way to accomplish this. It also helps me because I get more ideas for my setting. Before I did the campaign, right, like, I had a general idea of what Drench was about. I had news, a treasure hunting city, mining city, all of that. The player character who helped with the writing gave me a lot of the smaller details. So there's, like, a beetle stand where they get, like, little grilled beetles, and that was from their writing. It's a game that the citizens of Drench play where they toss a stone and count how many times it skips and how far it goes. They measure points based on that. That came from the campaign. There's crime groups that hold influence in the city and battle with each other. That's another piece that came from it. The player who helped me with the Drench lore and definitely went above and beyond, but the other places in the setting also did receive some help. Brisk, the military nation, which is mentioned early in the comic, they're very important, and one of my players who made a character from Brisk really helped me with figuring out how the military operate with logistics. So even, like, looking on the world map and being like, okay, dude, like, it doesn't make sense that they would only have garrisons at this and this place. Like, really, they would want to have positionings here. And also, like, talking about the military structure of Brisk. And that was helpful to me. Also, like, putting in a railway in between Drench and some of the other... putting a railway in between Drench and the surface so they could transport goods. Like, another example is there's a city called Verdant, which is Jellyfish Epcot. One of my players made a character from that city, which definitely survived. Don't worry, the character definitely survived, but they helped me with the layout of the city. Another helped me a lot with Flourish, which is the Mushroom Kingdom plus Steven Universe vibes. They helped me kind of come up with, like, different groups of the mushroom people that live there and, like, what they would be doing. Another fun way that D&D helps me with my comic is you can sometimes get, like, organic lore that comes up. So there's, like, right, like a player making their characters, there's the engaging with the setting ideas, there's just writing an area of the world, but there's also, like, stuff that just, like, comes up. So an example is there's a major piece of Drench's history that actually came from my first session of the campaign, where one of the players, who is a Mutilid, which is a badger person, they made a joke about eating another one of the player characters, which is a mushroom person, so like taking a bite out of them. And then that led to this whole kind of questioning of, wait, like, what's going on here? Was that something that would happen in this setting? Like, is it something people would do? That led me to develop lore about a major conflict between Drench and Flourish, which is the Mushroom People city. That was a major component of lore for both Drench and Flourish. And that came from an offhand player character comment. And there's other things too in the comic and the setting that kind of develop from this organic playing around that you get of D&D. And it's this unique kind of engagement with the setting that I don't think you can really get anywhere else. And the thing is, it's like, right, when you're making a fantasy comic, like, you want your setting to feel alive and to feel engaged with. And D&D, for me, has been extremely helpful for that. It's been a way for me to get energized and excited about it, because I have the comic I'm working on, but then I also have the campaign I'm doing some prep for. And they kind of bounce off each other and feed each other. Also, this drawing, actually, I got some help from my D&D party. The playground at the bottom is carved out of stone, and it's of the Worldwood Lizard, which is one of the creatures in my setting. It's basically a god kaiju. But yeah, I was like asking him about what would be in the Drench Riverside Park, and then they were like, oh, playground of the World Lizard. So that was like a nice little example. So that's how D&D has helped me create my comic. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, as I will be doing more videos like this in the future. I also have an animatic that'll be coming out in the near future that is a little promotion for the comic, and it's actually from a song in Epic the Musical, which is a very, very cool rendition, The Odyssey. So yeah, have a peaceful day.